let me be quite frank here. Half of the Ayn Rand Institute is not even American, maybe even three-quarters of it. They're not even Americans. You know, these naturalized people who will move to Puerto Rico as soon as the tax code is sufficiently in their favor. These are not Americans. Hello and welcome to the Bruno e Linzio transmission. Hello Linzio, how are you?
Ciao di nuovo Bruno, come stai questa settimana?
I'm feeling very well, thank you. How about you?
Bene, bene. Domanda per te, quando farai una trasmissione dal tuo magnifico Duomo di Milano?
When am I going to make a transmission directly from the Duomo of Milan? Yeah, I don't think that's quite possible. But
are there rules against it? You're not allowed inside and to do a broadcast? We can do one from outside. You sent me a photograph from outside.
From outside, yes. There's going to be a lot of noise and people.
Well,
but
you normally
inside,
get that through your windows anyway.
well, not quite the same thing. But as far as inside, it is a church, you know. It's you can't be yelling and screaming.
Yes, quindi possiamo essere accusati di promuovere la teocrazia cristiana.
Very good. We can be accused of promoting Christian theocracy. Yes.
And I don't doubt we would be. We would be. We would be. Never mind the beauty, the phenomenal, the unspeakable beauty of that place. And I really hope that we can work something out. Other than that, just let's tell people, look it up. Look it up. Have a virtual tour.
Yes, look up Duomo, Duomo of Milan.
Well,
it's one of the most magnificent cathedrals you'll ever see. Really, it's amazing. It's the cathedral, I think it's the building period that took the most time ever to build in human history. There's no building that took as long as the Duomo to finish. And it's quite something. Every single corner, everywhere you look, there's a sculpture, and they're all different. You'll see thousands of faces, every single one different with its own meaning, and the gorgeous inside with all these glass windows, and every window has its own glass painting. It's quite amazing.
Well, this is your mission. You have to get special permission to do a trasmissione from inside Il Duomo. Okay?
I'll have to contact Matteo Salvini directly. From him.
I thought you were already on intimate terms.
Yeah, I'll be having lunch with him in just a few hours.
I mean, I know he's very busy deporting Muslims, and I think that's an excellent thing, but he should be able to take time out to get this thing arranged.
Yeah, I think this is more important than even that.
Oh, certo. So, what have you been thinking about this week?
Well, what I've been thinking about is Plato versus Aristotle, the history of the West that always repeats itself. It's always this conversation between Plato and Aristotle. And the thing about Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, her magnum opus, is that John Galt seems to have shifted history. You see, he stops the motor of the world. He takes the great industrialists and tells them, stop working for the enemy. Stop enabling the enemy. Stop enabling the parasites, the state. And this phenomenon would not have occurred if not for John Galt. And I think we are living this situation today. We see Google working with communist China to provide a censored version of its operating system. We see Facebook...
With the support of the Ayn Rand Institute, with the support of leftivists who just want everything open with China. Yaron Brook has said the issue of free trade with China is not subject to discussion. It is settled. It doesn't matter that we rebuild China from the wreck that it was because of its collectivist policies, as long as we don't have tariffs between our nations. When in actual fact, what happened was they had huge tariffs and America had none. Yaron Brook supports that, but I'm deflecting you. Carry on with your theme.
No, that's very good. You're getting me fired up because I think this issue with China is the most important issue, period. The global dominance of the United States, and some call it the American Empire, of course, because after the Second World War, in fact, if not in theory, the United States is occupying every single country on the planet, essentially. And we might have some disagreements as to how to handle that should the United States intervene into other countries to the extent that it does. But I think we can all agree that this arrangement is much more sensible than letting China dominate in Africa, letting China take over your little subcontinent of Australia, and letting
New Zealand.
And New Zealand, right? They call it Australasia. What is the continent itself called, or Oceania?
Yes, yes. Oh well, that's from 1984, of course, but it's really instructive. I've just been rereading George Orwell's novel. Really instructive. Who is the #1 exemplar on the face of this earth at the moment of 1984, with telescreens in every home and everything being monitored? Just what you're talking about with Google, it is communist China. And so as far as questions of government intervention to stop this happening, I'd be interested in your point of view on this. But as far as I'm concerned, Google and Facebook and all the rest of them are actively aiding and abetting an avowed enemy of Western civilization, and of course of the United States in particular. And China has explicitly declared it wants to be the #1 superpower by 2049, which is the 100th anniversary of the communist Chinese revolution. We must not let that happen. And when they have initiated force against us, which they have, all bets are off. We can use retaliatory force, and if that includes breaking up evil big tech like Google, I think, but my thinking does waffle a little bit on this issue, I think I'm for it. Because they are, as Lord Haw Haw was closed down in Britain during World War II, and I have to say I just watched for the 3rd time Darkest Hour today. It was on television. I've seen it twice in the cinema. And you realize the enormity of the consequences of appeasement. For Google and Facebook and all the rest of them to be in bed with the communist Chinese, not to mention the Muslims, is unconscionable. And any action government takes to ameliorate the effects of that is justified.
Oh, you've been watching Darkest Hour. I've been watching The Man in the High Castle, where the Nazis actually win the war, which is a very good series. I suggest anyone interested in science fiction and alternate history to watch this, because it shows what it's interesting because it takes the Nazi regime seriously, and what would the actual state of affairs look like after the war. If you want, what would a Nazi regime, a stabilized Nazi regime look like? And of course, isn't that communist China, a stabilized communist China? And the interesting thing that I thought about during watching that series is just how acquiescent the people under the regime are. The regime has extremely high technology. It has the Concorde. It has a super high technology, much superior to the Japanese. So the Nazi regime, essentially, as depicted in this series, is I think realistic, given the current circumstances. And isn't that the whole point of Atlas Shrugged, that again, the producers, the so-called men of the mind, they would have gone, they just don't care about politics enough to even care about these things. They just, okay, we have to work in China, so I'll give the Chinese this censored search engine. Of course, Google, we know from internal documents and these recordings that are popping out, that they want to work to change the election results. They wanted to work to have Hillary win, and they thought they had managed to do so. And on this point, getting back to your point, I don't want to evade the question. The extent to which these big companies are working for political campaigns, they are manipulating their search results, they're manipulating the news feeds, they're manipulating this and that, and the same thing goes with certain television stations. And if these television stations are owned by foreigners, they can they are in fact foreigners intervening in the election results, such as Univision, which is not owned by an American, of course. Univision is this Latino station, and as far as what exactly to do, I'm no expert, but I wouldn't think that breaking them up is the solution. I don't really think that is the solution, but I may be wrong. I think they should be attacked for exactly what they're doing. So you're aiding an enemy government, or you're interfering with the elections. Attack them on those grounds, and you need the experts to determine exactly what that will look like.
Well, I don't know who the experts are, you see. I can't find any credible opinion on this which I respect, so I fall back upon my own judgment that this is a state of war that we are in, and all bets are off. But the other thing about it, I think, is this ought to be a huge wake-up call to all objectivists who actually use their minds. Now, remember, our party line for a long time has been that you don't have to worry about 1984 coming about. You don't have to worry about any of these dystopias like the Prisoner series, long before your time, coming about, because you cannot have advanced technology contemporaneous with totalitarian dictatorship, because by definition, totalitarian dictatorship suppresses and represses the mind and the activities of the mind, so it cannot develop technology. Now, we ought to have woken up about this, precisely because of what you're talking about and what Ein talked about in Atlas Shrugged, is the sanction of the victim, the acquiescence, and the active participation, in fact, of people who ought to know better. You have the captains of industry and technology actively conniving with totalitarian despots, and in the case of China, that despotism is now worse than it was 20 years ago. So all along, the likes of Yaron have been saying, don't worry about it, they're liberalizing the economy, so the politics inexorably. This is the old, intrinsic ineffable thing again. That there's some deterministic force at work that we're powerless to prevent. Well, they're wrong. They are rationalists, and they are wrong. You can have totalitarianism and technology with the acquiescence of the providers of the technology. And that is what we are seeing. And I'm afraid we just don't have a literate, developed response to that situation, because we've always persuaded ourselves that by definition it can never come about. It is coming about, it has come about, and it's a serious existential threat.
Oh, absolutely. I think the classic objectivist line is, oh, there's no such thing as an evil scientist, right? The evil scientist is just a Hollywood misrepresentation of the facts. Well, I've been reading this book on human evolution and these terrible topics that Yaron Brook thinks are evil in themselves. But of course he changed his line now. About human genetics and how they developed. There's this whole chapter devoted to the evils of eugenics, so of forced eugenics. And during the last century, during the 1920s, 1910s, 1930s, in the United States of America, the scientists were working with the government to sterilize people they thought were unfit to reproduce. This happened in the United States. These people are unfit to reproduce. We should sterilize them forcibly. And these ideas then went over to Germany. And of course, Hitler brought them to the extreme. He wouldn't just sterilize people, he would kill them. But the point here is that the scientists were actually working together with the government. They were going along with all of this. So there's many examples, be it in this, I'm thinking about this Nazi stuff and the Plato because this is what I've been thinking about recently. But there's all kinds of examples in current times. You don't even have to go back in history. Just look at what is happening now of these so-called men of the mind. They might have incredible scientific discoveries. They might have great technology, but they work with evil. That's just the facts. Yes, I agree. It's completely rationalistic to say, well, but reason and force, they cannot coexist. Really, they cannot coexist.
Well, you see, they can if the forces of reason are not sufficiently reasonable to realize that, as the line in The Darkest Hour today by Winston Churchill, you cannot negotiate with a tiger when your head is in its mouth. And that's what we have to get back to, is standing uncompromisingly against the forces of evil. But another thing I saw this afternoon, just after The Darkest Hour, was the Mark Levin show on Fox TV, and his guest was one Patrick J. Michaels from the Cato Institute. And they quoted Ayn Rand and the New Left, the anti-industrial revolution, and they were talking about the corruption of science. Patrick J. Michaels, he's an expert on global warming. It really gets him fired up, and he knows every last little nuance of the subject, but he's also very familiar with Ayn Rand, and he talked about Stadler and the, what's it called, the State Science
Institute.
Yes, at the Shrugged, they had a whole segment devoted entirely to that. And I was just, after watching The Darkest Hour and then seeing this on Mark Levin, an uninterrupted 10 or 15-minute segment was magnificent. And I have to take my hat off to Mark Levin for the television that he provides once a week, which is a welcome relief from the standard fare on Fox. And I did want to tell you a funny story about another viewing experience I had on Fox this week. But if you wanted to make an observation about Plato and the state running of reading.
Yeah, Plato, again, I just want to say that again, just if it wasn't clear enough, it's Plato versus Aristotle, always. We always go back to that. And if you think that, if you look at the left and you think, oh, these people are so evil, you've seen nothing. You've seen nothing. You do not know the extent to which evil will prevail if you do nothing to stop it. Plato was a person who invented the idea of the noble lie. The noble lie. We will lie to the public. We will lie to the public in order to achieve our goals. Also, he has this idea of a secret society governing the government. In other words, this night council that works completely in the dark, making decisions, enforcing them on the governments. You know, when we talk about this person is a puppet, then that's what we're seeing. These are not new ideas. And if Plato went along with this, why do you think people living today with much less noble motives than Plato will not take from his book, learn what you need to have a totalitarian state and put it into action? But please, let's hear a happy story now. Let's not dwell too much on this totalitarianism, shall we?
Well, I would just like to say that to credit or blame Plato for the concentration camps is a bit of a stretch, which some of our people are inclined to do. That he didn't have anything like that in mind. He was looking to how can we get the greatest degree of social harmony, given that you're dealing with entities, and this is the other really interesting aspect, who are torn. You know, we have the rational element, we have the spirited element, we have these base appetites, and they're all at war with each other within the individual, let alone within society. So he was just concerned to how do we keep it all under control? And he didn't have as a solution to all these warring elements and conflict within us that we put people in concentration camps. But it's true that that is where those ideas lead. But you can't say that he was one of the creators, along with Immanuel Kant and Hegel, of the concentration camps. I think the case is a lot stronger with Hegel that might be so. But still, to say a thing like that also, again, endorses determinism, because it means that a certain person's ideas inexorably are accepted by the rest of humanity. No, we all have a choice as to whether we accept those ideas or not and put them into practice. But I'll come to my story. Again, it's Fox TV, the Tucker Carlson show. And I watch TV with the sound down because of the that I've discussed before, which drives me crazy. But there's enough information going on at the bottom of the screen in the chyron for me to get the gist of what's happening. And so Tucker's talking about outrage over the fact that a transgender female who was a male but has transitioned to being a female participated in a female sporting event and won because he was still a male with all the musculature of a male. And so I see this on the screen, and then Tucker introduces his guest, and I assumed this was the transgender athlete in question. And I looked at this person, I thought, my God, that's a good tranny job. That's the best I've ever seen. That's really persuasive. And then I looked more closely and I saw this nose ring. I thought, I know that nose ring. That's Amy Peikoff. That's ob-leftivist Amy Peikoff. What the hell is Tucker bringing her in here to talk this? Why is he doing that? And I think, so I had to turn the sound up at that point against my better judgment. And there's Amy going, but I think Tucker thought that she was going to be as outraged as he by the unfairness of the situation where women are pitted against biological men in the name of political correctness. But it was all a bit of a waste of time because on Tucker Carlson you get 4 minutes, right? Most of it is occupied by him because he does most of the talking and he interrupts his guests and he doesn't let them complete their answers. Amy wanted to talk about the science of transgenderism, and she wanted to talk about the status of the right to compete in sports. I think what she wanted to say is that there's no inalienable right to compete in a sporting event because the rights of the owners of the sporting event trump those of any so-called right to compete. Then I thought to myself, now, if Tucker only knew, here's Amy saying there's no inalienable right to compete, but she also upholds the inalienable right to migrate from some shithole country for any dinky little savage anywhere on earth. And then I thought to myself, why is Amy even in the studio? Why is she not down on the southern border with welcome signs for these 4,500 dinky little savages from Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador and all these other Central American places who are, as we speak, marching toward the southern border? My big concern is that Trump is talking about putting the military there to stop them, but he's not doing anything. And that last caravan got in. All of those people are now scattered throughout America. And my fear is that all this bluster on his part is just that, and he's not really going to stop them. But of course, they will have the support, and it's not just Amy who should be down there with welcome signs and also amnesty and an apology, but Yaron and Binswanker. Why are they not all down there? They probably are by now.
But they're just like leftists. They're just like leftists. They want to live in their isolated community, and who cares about the normal, regular American that doesn't have a 10-foot fence in front of his community? Who cares if on the public roads these people come in? Who cares if George Soros is spending millions of people for these people to come in? Who cares? They do not care because, first of all, let me be quite frank here. Half of the Ayn Rand Institute is not even American. Maybe even three quarters of it. They're not even Americans. You know, these naturalized people who will move to Puerto Rico as soon as the tax code is sufficiently in their favor. These are not Americans, and they have no connection to the people. They will leave the United States as soon as Estonia becomes more free market. Oh, Estonia has a 2% flat tax. Let's move there right now. This is the mentality of these people.
And Estonia probably has a free trade deal with communist China.
Quite possible, isn't it? And of course now we have a person who's even less of an American. He's been, I think, Safani has been here for just a couple of years or something like that. And these people are running the institute of the woman who would, if she could, spread her body on top of New York City in order to stop from being destroyed. These people will just leave. They don't care. They have no interest in saving the United States. It's all they talk about. This Yaron book show. It's oh, the United States has no chance, and the next Ayn Rand revolution will be in Romania or in Mongolia, and that's where our hope lies. This is the kind of people we're dealing with. So I just really don't have much respect for these people. And again, if they have no connection to the country, why would they care what happens to the citizens of the country? If a dinky little savage wants to cross the border, he's just as much as an American as Johnny from Johnny from from next door in Alabama or something. They don't care. First person that crosses the border from Honduras is just as American as anyone else.
Yes, that is what they believe, and that's why I say I'm surprised they're not down at the border as we speak with their welcoming sign. But as you say, actually, they don't give a shit. It's just about personal enrichment, which perverted view thereof they would claim is consistent with the principles of Ayn Rand. It makes me rich, so therefore we'll do it. I mean, these are loath. I've got to get this term in. Subhuman.
You got it in after the bell rang.
After the bell, but then no, you've still got to run with the whole thing. So by our next show, we should know the fate of the caravan and whether Trump has actually put troops down on the border, and we shall take it from there. And in the meantime, you ready? Pronto? 3, 2, 1, moga.
Moga. Make objectivism great again, everyone. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Buonanotte, buongiorno, Bruno.